Winter at the courthouse. With me in studio, Shan Wu, a former federal prosecutor who now represents clients in white-collar criminal matters. So, Tom, tell us what happened in the courtroom this morning.
Right. So for Alvin Weisselberg, it really kind of closes a bit of a chapter for him and yet opens another one of going from staunch defendant to somebody who admitted his guilt and will now have to testify against the very corporation he used to be the chief financial officer for. That off-the-books payment scheme that you mentioned there, Chris, is the idea that he was able to get payments for Mercedes-Benz, multiple Mercedes-Benz cars that he had, an apartment in New York City, a garage, other cash benefits. It's not necessarily illegal for him to have received those things from the Trump organization. It was illegal, according to prosecutors, and now according to Weisselberg himself, for him not to pay the taxes for that compensation and for the Trump organization not to present the proper filings for it. So that's really what jammed him up here. That's what he's in trouble for. As you said, yes, a 5-month jail sentence on Rikers Island here in New York City for him. That's what he has ahead of him. But that'll be sentenced, and he'll go there after a late October trial involving the Trump organization, which was indicted at the same time as Weisselberg, part of the same indictment approximately a year ago. So that's coming up first. Weisselberg has to provide truthful testimony to that. No indication here at all, Chris, that the former CFO plans to turn against the former president personally.
So you, Shan, represent white-collar clients, right? And I'm wondering what you make of this decision by him. Okay, I'm going to plead guilty in this case that's about the organization, but I am not going to cooperate with this other investigation by the Manhattan DA into Trump.
This is a big win for Weisselberg's defense team and really a loss for the DA. It's a sweetheart deal for him. It's very little time. I'm not putting down the fact the 75-year-old going to jail for any amount of time is not easy. But given what he was facing, 15 years, this is a slap on the wrist for him. It's another example of really the kind of, I don't know what the reason is for it, but the timidity of Alvin Bragg in going after Trump. I mean, he had prosecutors ready to go on Trump, backed it off. Weisselberg is the CFO of the organization. So unless the theory is he was running rogue, doing things, it's inexplicable that the path doesn't lead to Trump.
So was this a case, do you imagine, where they took what they could get? They wanted to make sure that he was punished to some degree?
It's a case, honestly, as a former prosecutor, now at defense counsel, it's a case where the prosecutors blinked. They had a lot of leverage on him at his age with that kind of time. They could have demanded that they go to trial if he wouldn't take a harsher plea. Because in white-collar cases, it's all about the paper documents. You don't have a great defense to say, I got this income, but I didn't pay the taxes to it. He is the CFO. It's not like he's a very simplistic-minded person, unsophisticated. So they had a lot of leverage. They blinked, basically, just to check the box, get the case done with.
Tom, I'm also curious, if he's willing to testify about the business, what are the implications for Trump? I mean, it is hard to separate Donald Trump personally from the business professionally, right? It's intertwined with his personal wealth, his lifestyle, his image.
The man is the brand, and the brand is the man, effectively. And so you're right, Chris. Yes, it is difficult to separate Donald Trump from his business or vice versa, but it is a little bit easier to separate Donald Trump and his wealth from his business. He does have his own, we know this from his presidential filings, don't know his current financial condition, but we know from the filings when he was president that he had his own wealth, his own financial securities and instruments outside of his business. So it's not as if that's the only thing that he has. If the Trump organization was shut down today, every golf course closed, every hotel closed, Donald Trump would still have some wealth, granted not to the degree that he has now. It's also important to remember that over the years, Donald Trump shifted away from owning the physical properties himself, from managing the physical properties himself, to licensing his name and brand. Now, we haven't seen as many of those deals since obviously he became president, and since then, and since he's left the White House and now former president, but still he was able to accumulate cash wealth that way as a means of driving his own pockets as well as his, to the benefit of his corporation. So there is a little bit of daylight there that does exist in as far as the wealth he holds personally.
And Shan, you mentioned that Weisselberg, because of his position, likely knew if not everything, most things, right, that were going on within the organization. In a plea deal like this, where does cooperation end? If there's some new investigation, for example, would it indemnify, would it keep him from being charged in something like that? Where does a cooperation agreement end?
In this situation, his lawyers have fashioned a very narrow cooperation agreement. He's basically agreeing to tell the truth if he gets called to testify, and he's admitting what he personally did. So if new charges arise, he could easily take the Fifth Amendment to those charges and basically insulate the organization and insulate Trump from doing that. This is not what we typically think of as a cooperation agreement where they're coming in and sitting next to the prosecutors, investigators, going through the books, explaining everything to them. It's very narrowly construed, and that's why it's really a big win for him and not a good deal for the prosecution.
Shanmue, thanks so much for coming in. Appreciate it. Tom Winter, appreciate your reporting as well. One more court appearance of note.